I was going to say that SEO with Fat Joe is as peaceful as this, but then the birds are all having fights.
Did you know that Google personalizes many searches by city, and Also Asked is the only tool to access live People Also Ask data at city level? Try for free at alsoasked.com.
Tired of SEO guesswork? Quadra's AI agent goes deeper to uncover high-impact optimizations and completes hours of SEO in minutes. Get started now.
Hello. Thank you for sticking with me, almost bar time. I'm here to talk about AI bot traffic and how Google will not save you. First off, meet Charlie. Charlie is our friendly neighborhood performance marketer. We've been noticing something strange about a few of their campaigns recently, driving kind of above average clicks, but the conversion rate has fallen off a cliff. And all of the usual kind of optimization playbook just isn't really doing anything. So tell me, first off, hands up, has anybody experienced really skew-whiff performance data suddenly impacting a campaign? Hands up. Yeah? Anyone generates leads and suddenly noticed, yeah, I'm having a really good week, only for the sales director to turn around and say, what is this nonsense? Yeah? So Charlie was having a bit of a hard time, dug into their weblogs, and found they were being hit with bots. Quite a few bots, quite a few more than what the invalid traffic being reported by Google told them. There's also some weird, suspicious users going on. Frustrating time. So what is this all about? So bots are a type of invalid traffic. Invalid traffic is anything, any clicks, any traffic that doesn't come from a real user with genuine interest. So these clicks aren't going to offer any real conversion potential. There are two buckets. There's general invalid traffic, and this is the kind of stuff that Google and other ad platforms are generally really good at picking up on and reporting. They include things like duplicate clicks, known crawlers and spiders, things that tend to declare themselves as bots. Then you have something called sophisticated invalid traffic, and this is the stuff that's trying to hide itself. It's non-self-declaring. You can't use kind of simple rules to filter this out of your performance. And the reason why Looney exists, what we find is that a lot of sophisticated invalid traffic is slipping through the nets that ad platforms have in place. And part of that is down to the sophisticated nature of them. This isn't a new concept, so there are different types of sophisticated invalid traffic. You've got your malicious bots, you've got your scrapers and spiders and things that aren't declaring themselves. So they might actually not be doing any kind of malicious damage. They're maybe scraping data, scraping information, checking out your latest prices, but they're not saying that they are a bot. And so when they click on your ads, it is costing you money. You've got click and capture farms. Yes, capture farms, I didn't realize was a thing until recently, but you have people who are going through and filling in your forms. They're not genuine users. They're spoofing the capture forms. So some of those preventative measures that we're familiar with won't always catch this. You've got incentivized and accidental clicks, competitor clicks. Some of these will be dodgy publishers that are trying to up their revenue from ad networks. Some will just be collecting information and not directly trying to generate revenue from this. But the problem is that unless it's detected and prevented, it will be having an impact on your performance marketing. And what we're seeing increasingly with the introduction of generative AI is that the sophistication of the bots out there in the web has grown substantially. They're getting better at mimicking human behavior, at spoofing systems. It's also become far easier for us who don't have perhaps the high degree of coding that might have been required to generate bots in previous times. We can go use generative AI to build a basic click bot and send it out, design it to hide itself, and off it goes and causes a bit of havoc. So if you've got a disgruntled consumer or a black hat competitor, they might be spinning some of these things up far more easily than ever before. And with it getting smarter, it becomes far harder to detect without rapidly innovating your approach to detection. It's a bit like how certain creatures evolve to stay hidden. You have to be really adept to figure out and spot the hidden danger. So I hope you can all see. Tell me, how many snakes do you see? Hands up if you spot one. Have you got feeling? Hands up if you can see two. Two? Oh, we got a couple of twos. Well done. Three? Oh, we've got a three down there. Ah, well, there's only two. That's funny. But there you are, pretty well camouflaged. Just zoom in again so you can kind of see. There they are. The point that I'm trying to make here is that you can't control for what you can't see. Visibility is really important, and this is what is becoming harder in the age of AI. Gaining visibility into the quality of your traffic, especially at a time where ad platforms are introducing automation to take control away from you, to take visibility away from you. So at Lunio, we analyze traffic. We analyze the legitimacy of traffic and the prevalence of invalid traffic, especially sophisticated invalid traffic across ad networks. And what we see is that overall, this is a sample taken from March, but overall we see around 20% of traffic is invalid. It varies by platform, it varies by industry and by campaign type, but this is a substantial problem, and a lot of advertisers aren't aware. They just assume that the ad networks are taking care of this, and they are doing a certain amount, but they're by no means capturing all of it. They don't have a massive incentive to. The stuff that I described as general invalid traffic, they are obligated to capture that. But the sophisticated stuff requires you to constantly innovate, constantly prioritize detecting new and evolving types of invalid traffic. And that's not something that typically these platforms are doing. And in terms of the monetary problem this is causing, there's different figures out there, different predictions, but we are talking overall as $100 billion issue that is only growing. Even if we see, I'm going to use my little laser here, if the percentage is predicted to stay around this 20%, we're talking about ad fraud, which is ad fraud and invalid traffic kind of go hand in hand. We're talking 100 billion, and that's not even taking into account the additional costs of bots wreaking havoc on your website once they're there and the wider bot issue. We're just going to focus in on the PPC impact. So to make this a little bit clearer in terms of an example for your ad spend, imagine that I've made these numbers really easy for me because my mental maths are not 100%, but imagine you had a 1 million ad spend, 10% sophisticated invalid traffic rate, so half of what we're saying is out there on average. That would equate to 100,000 in wasted ad spend. But we don't just stop there. So you also then have the missed revenue opportunities from the ad spend that you could have spent on real people. If you had a conversion rate of say 1 to 3, that would equate to general maths around 300K in missed revenue opportunity. And then you layer onto that the fact that your data has been polluted by fake form fills or by fake engagement on page that looks close to human but isn't real, and you might be optimizing or remarketing to the wrong kinds of signals. So we can't afford to bury our heads in the sand on this. And it feels at times like some of the ad networks are. I know that Meta is in hot water at the moment. I think they've got, $7 billion ad fraud lawsuit that the Supreme Court did not let them skip out on. So we'll see more on that this year. But I did focus a bit on Google this year and in this talk. And to be fair to them, they have done more than most. But I wanted to give you a quick history of Google's approach to invalid click prevention. Because it all started about 20 years ago when 70 advertisers bandied together to take them to court over click frauds. And Google settled for about 90 million. And at that point in time, they launched their real-time invalid click filtering and the metrics that you know and love today in your campaigns, where you can see how many have been flagged and invalid and you're not being charged for. At the time, they were really kind of building a lot of PR around this. So you had your click fraud czar, I can't remember his name now, but he was there up until 2009. And when he left, he wasn't replaced. And instead, the focus shifted to ad fraud and publishers and that side of where kind of invalid traffic was happening. And it didn't really come back into focus until the methbot. And I don't know if any of you remember this, the Eve ad fraud scheme, which was this massive bot network and scheme that I think cost millions and millions. And Google did pay a lot of that firsthand, but they weren't the ones to identify all of these bots that were costing advertisers this money. A third party did, and then the FBI and Google and these third parties over several years pulled together and put a stop to that. And at that point, we saw Google's IVT detection reach a level of predation by Media Rating Council. So it has improved over time, but we don't see any announcements about new metrics, new capabilities on this front. It's not a priority for them. And there are some key limitations that I want to flag. The first is the lack of transparency. So we get the click metric that you can find in your campaign in Google Ads that tells you the number of clicks that the real-time filtering identified as invalid and which you wouldn't have been charged for. And then in your billing, you also get anything that they've identified post hoc. You get a little credit adjustment, but they don't tell you where those clicks came from. With the credit adjustments, they don't tell you much about which campaigns that was, or which days or when those invalid clicks supposedly happened. They don't publish any industry benchmarks on the volume of invalid traffic out there. And they don't publish any kind of known blacklists of things that you should be excluding to help kind of clean up your traffic generally. They also don't block any of the invalid traffic. So they might refund some clicks for you, but that agent is still free to go onto your site and fill in your form or pollute your data in other ways. And generally, the vigilance here, we can see from our data and from third-party studies on things like traffic from made for advertising websites, that the vigilance is not where it should be if you put advertisers first. To meet the Media Rating Council's threshold for accreditation, you have to have filtering in place for general invalid traffic, but you don't have to officially do much for sophisticated invalid traffic. And there's a lot of sophisticated invalid traffic that sits in a gray area where it's not actively defrauding advertisers or ad networks. There are these bots that have been spun up and they're clicking your ads to gather information, costing you money, but it's in this kind of gray area where there's no obligation for ad platforms legally to do anything about it. And that is where we're seeing a lot of waste impacting advertisers. And I can't help myself but point out, and Rob made this point earlier, if you guys were here for his talk, the lemon ad, plenty of people theorize that there is waste in the machine deliberately. Google is a very profit-driven business, and they will prioritize revenue over quality. We saw that in the antitrust lawsuit and some of the materials that were shared with that. So this is why I believe Google will not save you. But save yourselves, mostly. So some steps that you can take. Now, obviously, I work for Lunio. We're a third-party provider who can help you detect and prevent invalid traffic. But there are things that you can do yourself to understand whether you might be impacted. And if you are impacted, how to minimize that impact. And so there's 3 steps here that I want to go through. Awareness, action, and advocacy. Awareness goes back to my point with the snakes. So you can't take action against what you can't see. So first you need to verify how legitimate is your traffic. Then you need to look at where the illegitimate traffic is coming from. To do that, there are some signs generally that you've got a problem. So the most obvious one is spam form fills. If you're getting a huge uptick in those, or if you just have accepted a status quo of low quality leads, you might want to look into that. If you're seeing kind of extremes in your traffic in any way, so I gave the example earlier from our friend Charlie, clicks were up, conversions were down. You might have traffic coming from weird locations or weird devices that don't make sense. And it's, it could be a targeting issue, but it could also be you've been targeted by a bot network in Vietnam, for instance. Extreme bounce rates or click-through rates are often indicators, unusual session patterns, and generally you're looking for things that are odd. I really like this quote from Dr. Augustine, who is a ad fraud researcher. He says, when things are too high, too low, or too consistent, investigate further. So if you're doing a bit of your DIY analysis, what you want to do is break down your placements, your keywords, your locations, your time frames, your devices, and break those down and have a look at, are my traffic rates nearing 0 or 100 for particular placements? Okay, those placements probably driving a lot of invalid traffic. Let's exclude those. Similarly with session duration, or if you're seeing, again, this high volume of clicks but 0 conversions, nighttime spikes or flat patterns, these are all the kinds of things where once you're breaking it out by placement, you'll find things that you can kind of take action against. And at the IP level, if you are able to get into your web logs and have a look at the IPs that are actually clicking, you can look at, are you receiving an above normal number of clicks from the same IPs? Are you seeing unusual user agents or headless browsers, which are usually indications of bots, or something weird going on? So with user agents, you might have a really weird old operating system appearing across a number of different IPs and devices, but it could be a signal of a click farm. Suspect usage type, you might need a third-party reference site for this, but you can identify maybe some data centers and look at excluding those. So the exclusion part comes into the action step. You want to be excluding sources of invalid traffic and low-quality traffic, and maximizing the capacity of the exclusions that are available to you. So different ad platforms will give you different mechanisms, different types of exclusions. With Google, you're allowed to use IP exclusions. That's not the case with a lot of the social platforms, but you can set up custom audience exclusions, and there are other levers that you can pull. With Google, though, IP exclusions, they tend to be limited to 500 campaigns per 500 IPs per campaign. I need a trip to the bar. And so some tips for how to kind of make the most of that. If you are a big spender, you're driving a lot of traffic, you might get through the 500 IP per campaign exclusion list way faster than you'd expect. So rotating out and prioritizing IPs that you're seeing come back around again and again is good practice. Also, as much as Google hates us segmenting campaigns, sometimes it can be a smart move. If you're seeing, for instance, that you have a high volumes of invalid traffic in a campaign that's just coming from, say, mobile devices, maybe you want to split that out. That's a different point. That's the point about adjusting bid strategically. If you have factors that are driving a lot of invalid traffic, you might want to split that out and lower your bids or value settings for those particular groups. And with segmenting campaigns, it's more about getting extra capacity. So where it makes sense to split, so by location, by device, you can then open up more capacity. And then the final A is advocacy. So this is about asking Google for more. This is about being vocal about the things that we need to take control over the quality of our traffic. If you're a big spender, you have Google's ear way more than some of us smaller spenders. We worked with a very big Google ad spend, big spender, who were able to use our data to ask Google for more capacity to exclude IPs. So they identified the scale of the problem that they were having with invalid traffic. They blocked as much as they could, and then they tracked what was still coming through, even with the exclusions maximized. And they used that to go to Google and start a conversation about, hey, look, we're really being hammered here. Give us a bit more. And Google gave them quite a bit more. We're not all big spenders though, but collective pressure does work. And we know this from the increase we've seen in negative keyword lists for PMAX that have gone up to 10,000 recently, and other announcements that come as Google kind of listens to the collective voice of its customers. So we can push for change, we can push for more control to help us clean up our traffic. So before we all head to the bar, key takeaways. Number one, sophisticated invalid traffic is on the rise, and it's becoming a $172 billion problem, if some predictions are to be trusted, but definitely a $100 billion problem. And what we're urging you here is invest in sophisticated invalid traffic detection of some kind, whether you build it yourself or you work with a third party. You need to see the quality of your traffic. You need to understand what's actually clicking on your ads and what you're paying for. And sophisticated traffic is a different beast, and it's only getting smarter. Google's not going to save you, so you need to proactively pull on all the levers available to you. Don't just assume that ad platforms are taking care of this problem for you, or you're just wasting money. And The best levers we have today are exclusions. They're your sharpest weapon. They're not a perfect weapon, but they're what we got. So make the most of them and push ad platforms to give you more of them as and when you see that they're working. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here and listening to me. We are downstairs, so feel free to come and see us tomorrow. I'll be there for a chat. We can talk plants if you want. But yeah, have a lovely evening.